now we can officially start. So we know people have concerns, varying concerns about San Jose Japantown. We know you have hope and optimism. We know you have a lot of knowledge, a lot that you want to contribute to sustaining this space and this place. We're trying right now to learn as much as we can from the people who are willing to share with us. And so we are bringing people together to learn, to spark more discussion, to be in communication with each other, to be in conversation, and to be in community with one another, and to help build a community that is for San Jose Japantown. So places like LA, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, we see the impact, right? We see what's happened there. We see bulldozers, wrecking balls. Here in San Jose, it's much more subtle. But there's still urgency, right? And what we want to do is be able to share with each other around what that urgency looks and feels like. So although we haven't experienced the same, we can learn a lot from our parallel Japantown communities. And so with that, I want to thank our sponsors for today, San Jose Nikkei Resistors, the Japanese American Museum of San Jose, San Jose State Ethnic Studies Department, and San Jose State Asian American Studies. And so we would not be able to hold this event without all of those folks. Our guest speaker today is Kristin. She's going to be introduced by Trung Nguyen, who I will now introduce. So just really quickly, our agenda for today is the talk, the presentation. We will go into a Q&A, and then we'll go into facilitated small group discussions, which will be very nicely facilitated. So we hope that you all stay and talk to us. So with that, I want to introduce Dr. Trung Nguyen. He is an assistant professor of Asian American Studies at San Jose State University. His research examines how war and capitalism impact Southeast Asian American communities. He also researches history of Asian American radical movements and community resistance. And so I'd like to welcome him, and he will introduce Kristin.
Thank you so much, Erica, and thank you everyone for being here today. So just to echo some of Erica's sentiments, I just want to again thank the Japanese American Museum of San Jose for hosting such a wonderful space for us, San Jose Nikkei Resistors for being such wonderful partners in community and crime in order to make this conversation happen, the San Jose State Ethnic Studies Collaborative, and the San Jose State Asian American Studies Program for all of this today, and Tom and Susan and Erica for being in the conversation. So again, my name is Trung Nguyen, and I'm an assistant professor of Asian American Studies at San Jose State University. Not only that, but I grew up in San Jose. I was born and raised in Eastside. Yet in all those years, I never learned about Japantown. I didn't learn about the communities that were around me, despite growing up in San Jose for so many years. It was not until I went to UCLA and took an Asian American Studies class, Polar Asian American Studies, that I learned about the history of Japantowns, not just of San Jose, but especially Little Tokyo, Los Angeles. Not only did I learn about Japantowns, but I got to be there and be in the community. And what I learned about Japantowns was that it was not just a space that was about Japanese American history and community, but also this larger context of Asian American resistance. So for me, learning about Japantown and being there and living it was very much so about being in a living historical laboratory of community power. So for me, this history is very reflected in the relationship between San Jose State University and San Jose Japantown. Historically, there was an extremely strong relationship where one and the other were partners in building community resistance. From the 60s to the 70s and into the 80s, there are people here in this room today who are part of both communities and making what we see in the legacies still stand. Right? So together, the histories have always been interconnected. Our projects in liberation were tied into each other. However, what we have seen is that in the past few decades, including this one and from the 90s and onward, that relationship has fallen apart for so many different complex reasons. And part of it is because Asian American Studies at San Jose State was so under-supported and underfunded. And so that leads to a lot of disinvestment and the loss of a connection between the two. However, in the most recent years, we're seeing a stronger a buildup of Asian American Studies, and I'm happy to say that as of next fall, we're going to have our first Asian American Studies major launch. This is a 55-year fight and struggle from the original students and activists of that time, and we have people in this room who are a part of that. You know, this is shout out Vicky. It's still in it, right? So the success of that struggle would not have happened without the success of San Jose Japantown, without its struggles and communities and activists who stayed there and continues to come back. And our continued future will not be possible without this ongoing relationship. So what I'm hoping is that as Asian American Studies at San Jose State grows, so can we revitalize this connection with Japantown, and so it can be, again, a living laboratory of student resistance and community building. So with that said, that's why I'm hoping Kristin's conversation today about Little Tokyo and its context, she can help bring us lessons and things to reflect on. And I'm happy to introduce her, Kristin Fukushima, our very esteemed guest today. She is the Managing Director for Little Tokyo Community Council. She's been involved in Los Angeles Little Tokyo for so many decades, so many years, and has seen such wonderful projects come through. One of the latest is the First Street North project, which is a 10-year struggle, and she'll say more about that, but without further ado, please welcome Kristin Fukushima.
Again, my name is Kristin Fukushima. I use she and her pronouns. I'm really excited to be here. This feels like a really beautiful coming together of all the things I really care about, including Asian American Studies, Japantowns. I am in San Jose a lot because I both have family here and friends from here, and it's like really nice to be part of a formal event to talk about things that I really care about, and also with folks that I know care about similar things, because that's why we're all here. Before I start, I just want to say I don't see myself coming as like an expert of like, this is what we're doing in LA, but really I think something that I would like to see more of again is the Japantown that always learned from each other and built with each other. And I think there even used to be like the California Japanese American Leadership, CJACLC, whatever that stands for, California Japanese American Community Leadership Council. I did it. So like an intentional way to bring the Japantowns together to talk about similar issues and how to raise each other up. And I think that in thinking about what Chung was saying, a lot of things that we used to build as networks to work with each other have kind of fallen aside in some ways. And so I think that as we face new challenges, it's a good time to think about what we can bring back or what we can build anew. So with that, my first few slides are just about Little Tokyo, but assuming that this is an audience that is familiar with Japantowns, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but just to set some ground and context first. So Little Tokyo is 140 this year. We're doing our 104th celebration. Thank you. Yes, so at 140 years old, Little Tokyo down in LA, we are the second oldest neighborhood in LA. That's also because LA likes to tear down various neighborhoods. So that's what bumped us up to second over time. It's like a very sad way to get to the top. I always use the example of Chinatown. The original Chinatown was raised to build Union Station. So the Chinatown of today is sometimes called New Chinatown and was built in the 20s. So things like that is how we've gone up to second. The original, or the first oldest is El Pueblo, which is also kind of the main area of when this area was still stewarded by the original indigenous tribe, the Tongva tribe, and so I think that's why the Spanish conquistadors went there. They're like, already built up. Little Tokyo, this always feels tricky. So I now say we are one of 4 remaining historic Japantowns. I used to say 3, and then Sawtelle went through a process to name themselves a Japantown, and I also just think about places like Salt Lake City or Sacramento or Chicago where they have areas that they call their Japantown and Little Tokyo, so I want to honor that as well. Just because we have a state bill behind the 3 doesn't mean the others are not valid as well. Little Tokyo's our history. These are just pictures from like Nisei Week back in the 30s and a picture from incarceration era. The picture in the top left is a picture from where this is a picture from when folks were being picked up to be incarcerated. That is the old Nishihonganji Buddhist temple, now owned by Janam and home to Go for Broke National Education Center. I also have a little office closet in there. And then the picture in the bottom corner is a picture from the Asian American movement and resistance against displacement and encroachment. This is a picture from the Little Tokyo People's Rights Organization. And I like to point to these because I think that, at least in Little Tokyo, we have been through many, many waves of displacement. And I say that also to say, when people are like, oh, how are you all so far along in all these different things? Little Tokyo has a long, long history of having to fight back against all these different forms of erasure or displacement. And I think that is what has really forced us to think about how to be resistant, to be resilient, to persevere in the face of like keeping this community together. So we just continue to learn from the lessons of folks who came before us. This is just what Little Tokyo used to look like. I like to point to this one because you can see Little Tokyo used to be much larger. It was more like, I think that, I don't even know if this is the full map, but we usually say like 10 square blocks, and now it's about 2 to 3 square blocks. And that most of that happened after the war. But although much smaller, and there's many other pockets of Japanese Americans in Southern California, I always argue that Little Tokyo is today still like the hub of the community, and the only permanent place, right? And we're seeing it now in our version of the South Bay, Gardena and Torrance, where as the Japanese companies have been moving out to like Texas, a lot of those things that upheld the community are starting to erode because Toyota and Honda are now in Texas. This is just a map to show the density of what the area used to be like. The other, I don't know if it's similar up here, but down in Little Tokyo existed the way it does because it was the only place people of Japanese ancestry were allowed to live due to racially restricted covenants and also redlining. We like to say cheesy things like, oh, but then like a lotus, we emerged from the swamp to become a beautiful flower. And I think it became a place from once being, this is where you have to go, to a place where we are fighting actively to be here. So even Nisei Week, I think, is now 85 or something like that. Nisei Week started as a project to bring people back to Little Tokyo back in the 30s. So that's how long Little Tokyo has been thinking about, like, how do we bring people back to the neighborhood? How do we revitalize this neighborhood? How do we trick people into coming and spending their money on our businesses? We'll throw a festival, we'll throw a parade. So this is all the active work that we've been building off of. And then our future, so it is our future and also a future under threat with the different construction projects, different metro projects. And it is our community. So just to go into what LTCC is, so LTCC, we turned 25 this year. Big year for celebrations. So the Little Tokyo Community Council was founded back in 1999 after there were some big fights in the 90s among community members. We don't have to get into it. But coming out of that, then a lot of big changes started to happen in the neighborhood. And it really prompted the executive directors from the Japanese American National Museum and Little Tokyo Service Center to reach out and say, maybe we should work together. They were not friends at the time. Just to spill some community tea, they were not friends at the time, but they were like, you know, Little Tokyo is the bigger picture. And if we don't work together, then Little Tokyo won't be here, and then what does it mean for us, right? Like really thinking about like, what is that big picture? So they reached out and they said, well, let's just start with, we need to have a place to gather, to talk about community issues. We should share out information, and also try to coordinate a little bit more. And then very quickly into our history, I'll just stop here. Very quickly into our history, I think like only a few years into the community council being formed, the city tried to build a jail in Little Tokyo. And that is what prompted the organization to say, okay, maybe this is not just a place to share information, but to be a place where we can organize and mobilize the community because we're building a coalition. Because LTCC said we wanted not just be a place for nonprofits, a place for the small businesses, the residents, the churches, temples, and also vested stakeholders. By that I mean, and I'm sure this is similar here, there's a lot of people who call Japantown home, but they don't live or work here. But it is their, you know, their home of their heart, the place that they come, the place that generationally they've always gone out to. So they are still stakeholders, even if they don't have like a literal financial stake. So with that, our mission today is to protect, promote, and preserve Little Tokyo, and really with the intention of bringing people together to speak with one voice. And sometimes that voice is, you know, a little bit of a facade. Like it's not like everyone agrees, but the idea is to present a united front so that people will say, okay, we cannot divide and conquer this community. We will take you seriously as like a neighborhood that is speaking together. Just a little bit about who we work with. So Little Tokyo is made up of 400 businesses, over 50 nonprofits. Little Tokyo has too many nonprofits. Don't tell them I said that, but too many nonprofits. I'm like, we need to cut down on this. There's too much funding competition. We now have 5,000 residents, and that is a giant spike. We lost a lot of our housing in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s from redevelopment and other things. So at like 2,000, I think there's 2,000 to 2,500 residents. It was mostly low income and mostly low income senior housing specifically. As we've been going through our various waves of gentrification, we have seen a lot of market rate housing go up, and it has doubled our residents to now 5,000. And there's many more projects coming, including a giant project that I don't mention in this presentation, but it alone brings 1,500 units. Wow. So I don't know what that means in residents, but more than 1,500. This says 8 faith organizations, but unfortunately one of them recently left. But we still have the last remaining Japanese Catholic Center, Marianol. We have 4 temples and then 2 other Christian churches. And yes, so what do we do today as the community council? We see our first thing is to inform stakeholders on what's happening, to give people a place to come and talk about what that is. So we really try to base our positions on how does the community feel about it. So it's a lot of meetings. What do I do all day? I have a lot of meetings. We talk about how do we feel about that, and we really try to focus on consensus-based decision making and really making a transparent process. After we come to these positions, we see ourselves as the entity to engage with the city and to whoever else to protect the community's interests. And then we're able to say, through our community process, after all these meetings, we are speaking on behalf of the community. Here's all the people behind us, and this is what we want. Little Tokyo is not like the richest town. We don't have a lot of residents. So what do politicians listen to usually? It's like votes and money. For us, though, we can show up 100 people deep at a city council meeting, and they're like, okay, we'll take you seriously. So some of the things we work on, I'll just say this very quickly. So Little Tokyo has been going through a lot of development projects, so definitely a lot of development, metro projects. We also care about things like the trees, the lighting, the sidewalk. And when I first started, I was like, this is a silly thing to focus on. There's big issues. But I think it's like the day-to-day quality of life things that also matter, especially for residents, for businesses, for the people who do have to be there every day. If you have poorly lit areas, it won't feel safe at night. People want to come out. If the sidewalk is going to trip everyone, people are like, oh, it feels dangerous. So all these things are part of like the day-to-day that build up to the bigger picture. Self-determination and community control are, I'd say, our 2 biggest values as an organization, and that's really, we want to be at the table and we want to be the ones to decide what happens to our community. So even when the city comes in, we're like, that's great, but we have to be at the table first. If you're not talking to us first, then you need to start this over because this is about our neighborhood. We try to do the same with private developers. They don't always have to listen, but what we've learned is how to become fake planners is what we call ourselves. We've learned how to read planning documents or found people who know how to do it for us. And then say, okay, like what are our leverage points? Where can we jump in and yell at you about this thing? So these are things we've developed over the last 25 years. And then we also focus on different quality of life issues, including public safety, homelessness, housing, etc. And I guess just quick takeaways, and then I'll talk about my other things. So we started as an all volunteer-based organization. I will say that would be a lot harder for us to do now. People are so busy, things are a lot harder. Back in the late 90s, I think it was a little bit easier for folks. So it stayed as an all volunteer organization for the first 15 years of its existence. And then I was actually hired as the first staff to work on a different project, but through the organization. And this organization was really supported by, again, the museum and LTSC, and they put their own dedicated staff time into it. So I think that's the other thing I think about is like a lot of the bigger organizations that were established just dedicated and sacrificed themselves to put together this community coalition because they really believed in it. Now we have 2 full-time staff and 3 part-time staff, and we fundraise and we have a lot of activities, but that's really only something that we've built up over the last like 5-ish years. So, and hopefully we'll be bigger in the future. This also has allowed us to not just be reactive, but also to be proactive and think about how we can be ready for things to happen or even pursue things that we want. Little Tokyo was always good at being like, we don't like this. We've gotten better at saying also, and we want this. I think that's like a hardship. Like it's easy to look at something and be mad. It's hard to envision what you want when you're given that opportunity. And then process. We love process down at Little Tokyo. We will talk endlessly in circles forever. It's great. But what I have come to appreciate is that by having these really long conversations in all the spaces and going through this community process, we understand not everyone's going to agree, but if we can find common ground and if we can bring people with us through the whole journey, at the end they still might agree, but if they can understand and respect the process, then they'll feel better about it, right? Versus if you have a secret process or it's not transparent or their voices aren't heard, then it's hard to have that trust or that respect or take it seriously. So I think that although people are like, wow, you really took a year to make that decision, we're like, yes, but we were able to talk with everyone and bring everyone into the conversation in the room. And hopefully that at least feels good, even if they're still not like in love with the decision that we made. Okay. This is just timeline. I'm not going to talk about this, but we've done many things over our time. I think just big things. We did end up stopping that jail. Yay. Around the 2009-2011 era is when Metro started doing all their big projects in Little Tokyo, and that's when we really became planning type people. So I think the jail fight is when we realized we need to build our political power. It's one thing to be able to build community power, but we need to engage with our electeds. We need to make sure they listen to us and that they know they need to talk to us. So that was the start of that realization. The work in the early 2010s, and that's when I got involved. That's when we realized that we need to also know what we're doing. I think it's so daunting to do like development stuff, right? If you're not a planner, you're like, what is this thing of jargon? And then you come in to present and you're like, I don't know what they said. And you're intimidated, you don't want to say anything. You're like, I'll just go over here. And I will say this is where we're really lucky to have Little Tokyo Service Center, because they have paid planners on their staff, they have paid organizers. So I'll be like, can you read all these documents? And then come back and tell us what they say. And then we just try to make it fun and accessible for people. But I will say, yes, we're very blessed to have Little Tokyo Service Center in particular in this space because of those resources. The other thing that I just want to point out from here is, so a lot of these are like we've done things like we created a community design overlay. So we said, we know there's a lot of changes happening. We can't stop every project, but we can at least say, here are some design guidelines and principles that we want them to follow. And then we got the city to approve it, so it's now an official planning document. So any development that builds, they have to go through a plan check that includes our community design overlay that we made. As we went through our second wave of gentrification in the early 2010s, that's when we really started focusing on small business support. So the way we think about gentrification is, the biggest concern, right, is displacement. It's not clean and pretty and safe neighborhoods. We all love that. No one is mad at a clean, safe neighborhood. But we're worried about losing folks, right? Like, that's the thing. In Little Tokyo, we had already lost a lot of our housing, and that housing we had left was already, like, Little Tokyo Service Center owned most of it, so that was helpful. When it comes to the way people hold cultural power, we felt very strong there. But businesses did not have a lot to have, like, as far as support goes. So we focused a lot on small business support. Let's see here. So that brings me to Go Little Tokyo. So Go Little Tokyo came out of a initiative where the Metro, this is gonna work. Yeah, so this is Go Little Tokyo. This is our website. So with Metro funding, we created a community-based marketing program. I think we wanted to say this is an authentic voice from the community that cares about this, and we're telling you where to go. Like, trust us, the people from this neighborhood, like, you should visit our, like, Fugetsudo. You should go to the small business coffee shop. Don't go to the 3 Starbucks. Things like that. Yeah. And then with that, we also, I think this is the video I wanted to show. Oh no, hold on.
It's on you.
LTCC is I'll start that over. Oh no, Saya, where are you going?
And if you're an OG supporter, welcome back. With the new year, we thought it would be worth a reintroduction. In case we haven't officially met, we are Go Little Tokyo, a community-led project produced by the Little Tokyo Community Council, also known as LTCC. We highlight the unique cultural programs, community events, dining, and shopping experiences found in Little Tokyo out of our core love for the community, with the goal of supporting and sustaining this historic neighborhood, and in particular, our small businesses. LTCC is a nonprofit founded in 1999 and is a coalition of residents, businesses, and diverse organizations coming together to advocate on behalf of the Little Tokyo community. Driven by LTCC's mission to protect, promote, and preserve Little Tokyo, Go Little Tokyo works to amplify the essence of what matters to Little Tokyo's diverse community. You might live in Little Tokyo or just love to visit us. We want to bring people together through our shared love for Little Tokyo, whether it's our favorite foods at our local restaurants or understanding how we can help keep our favorite businesses' doors open. We're grateful you're here to support and love our favorite neighborhood, Little Tokyo. And we're excited to celebrate 25 years of LTCC and 140 years of Little Tokyo with you all this year. Thank you so much for being part of our Go Little Tokyo family. See you all in Little Tokyo.
That's Saya, my social media coordinator. I have staff now, it's so great. So I think that video does a good job of explaining things. Just other things that we do include, we put on events like Delicious Little Tokyo. What do people love? They love food, they love Japanese food. So using this as a model to bring people in and celebrate the neighborhood, support small businesses, and just I think part of it is we want to bring a lot of people, not just bring back, Japanese Americans, Asian Americans to the community, but how do we survive? We have to get a lot of people to come and support these small businesses. So but we want to guide them where they go. So Delicious Little Tokyo is like, we love these businesses, come to these businesses. So we now work with, we get 3,000 participants, and a lot of them are in that 18 to 25-year-old demographic, which is really great, because I think for us, it's how do we build future people who love Little Tokyo? Not just people who love Little Tokyo already, but we need to continue that wave. We also put on parties, like Haunted Little Tokyo. And this is a party that now has like 5,000 people. When it's back on the street, we can get up to 10,000 people, so it's a big festival, come on out. And then marketing communication, so I already showed these reels, and then we make merch. This is silly, I just really like to point it out because
So cute.
I just love merch, but also I think that in addition to being cute, it's a way of really saying like, we love our neighborhood and you can show off your love for it too. It also has a nice fundraising thing, but I really think just like giving people the chance to self-identify with this neighborhood is a way to really promote it and also help people feel invested. So yes, we make hats, we make totes, we make shirts, we make pins, we love merch. Oh no, where's it going? Okay. Great. And again, we're celebrating 140 years. I was going to show the website, but I'm running out of time. So you can go to our website, littletokyola.org, and I think that's where you can see our 25th anniversary stuff, our 140th anniversary stuff, see the way we lay out Go Little Tokyo and some of our projects. I did want to show this. We have been working on, I'm trying to get these up as like streetlight banners and like bus ads, things like that. This is our Go Little Tokyo mascot, Go-Go. We're in a little sash for the anniversary. This is actually, I'm sorry, this, now I'm just pointing out silly things, but this is our pattern for the anniversary that I really love. It's our mon, our logo, but then like, it's also an ume, and so she pulled it out and turned it into this pattern. So it's this thing here. I love it so much. It's on every corner. You can see it on every slide. Yes, so that's my LTCC and Go Little Tokyo work. The other thing I really wanted to spend some time on is Sustainable Little Tokyo. So this is the project that I was first hired for when I started working at LTCC a decade ago. I've been working in Little Tokyo for 15 years, it's fine. So Sustainable Tokyo started because after we went through all these fights with Metro about this big train line they're building, that'll be the second busiest transportation hub in the whole region. We knew like, yes, transportation is great. We want people to have that access, but also we know it comes with a lot of impacts, namely development, speculation, displacement, rising rents, all of that. So orgs came together to build Sustainable Tokyo, to sustain Little Tokyo for future generations. It is literally just taking all the community preservation work we've done for decades and then rebranding it. Because I think one thing when we talk about preservation is people are like, oh, so you don't want to change, you want everything to stay the same. We're like, we recognize that we need to change. Like the world is dynamic and evolving, we want to continue to change and meet that, but we also don't want to lose who we are and our roots. So Sustainable Tokyo is about that idea. So it's LTSC and LTCC started it, JACCC joined in 2014, and JANM just joined last year. So that's it. So our three pillars, it's cultural and historic, economic, and environmental. The environmental piece is, if the world's not here, we're not here. And then also really building on ideas of like Motainai, which is not even just like paper, but yes, Motainai. But even thinking about like the way it was explained to me by a reverend once was, this piece of paper doesn't just represent the paper, it represents the tree, the water, the people, all the things that went into building it. So when you throw it away, you're throwing away all of that energy and effort. And I was like, oh, that's very deep in me. Thank you. And then, or even like, if you're mad for no reason, that's Motainai. Like, why waste that energy on being mad? I was like, oh, I have to think about that. So that's where that idea comes from. But again, it really is building off decades and decades and decades of work. And we could not do this if folks had not done that work before us. So I feel very grateful for all the work they've done. The big idea was to create a vision for our future. We were like, things are gonna change. We're a little bit nervous about that. Maybe we should have a visioning session. So we sat down, we spent a year to plan. So we started in 2012, planned for a year. In 2013, we brought 250 members of the community together to do a 3-day charrette. So spent 3 days together, did sessions all day, various locations, and said, what are we afraid of losing? And then if we could do anything, what would that be? And like, what are we missing? We also happen to have these 3 parcels of undeveloped publicly owned land So if you're familiar with Little Tokyo, this is Janum. This is historic First Street North, so this is like Fugetsudo, this is Japanese Village Plaza, JACCC is down here, Nishi's over there. So this is the regional connector station site. This is Mangrove. That doesn't mean anything to you. This is currently an empty parking lot with the Gopher Brook Monument. So those are the 3 parcels of undeveloped, publicly owned land, and we said, okay, this is where we can like anchor ourselves. Private land is hard, we are not rich. Like a small building in Little Tokyo now goes for anywhere for like 4 to 6 million, and it's like a 2-story building. We're like, ooh. So with that, we said, but public land is owned by the public, we're the public, we can create a vision and say, listen, you need to do what the community wants. You need to build a community development by us. So that was the idea. Turns out, so we created the vision, we published it in 2014. It's 110 pages, it's very serious. We worked with like architects and fancy people so we could create a document that the city would go, oh, this is legit, this is a very serious document. And we've gotten a lot of agencies to incorporate it into their own principles of what they tell developers they have to do, so that's great. But getting community control over the land has taken a very long time. I thought this was gonna be like a 2-year project. We're still here, it's fine, it's fine. But actually because of that, we've done a lot of updates to the vision because things change so quickly. We realized like we can't say, well, this is what we wanted in 2014 and it's 2024. So almost like every few years we go through another round of like, let's update our vision. Let's make sure it still makes sense. And that feels tedious to people. I think people hate it. I'm not gonna lie. They're like, we're still talking about this, but like, what if things have changed? We wanna know. So where are we in our campaign? So Mangrove and First and Central, still working on it. First Street North though, we just had our groundbreaking last week. That took a really long time, and that one honestly should have taken like 1 minute. But that's fine. We had a council member who's now in jail. He's a felon. So that's why that did not happen, it turns out.
Wow.
Jose Huizar, look him up. It's on public record, we all know. So once we realized he was just not going to do a single motion in city council to make this happen, we were like, okay, fine. So we did a campaign, our My FSN campaign, and those things like mahjong night and like bingo night. Like we would just do like fun community things and then like make sure we spread the word, and then also would have protests, petitions, things like that. Once he got arrested, we got a new council member. Suddenly the ground lease got renewed. It was so easy. Look at that, the whole time, it was so easy. So the ground lease got renewed back in 2019, and then 2020, Metro tried to build something on the station site and we did not like it, so we got them to shut it down. That was great. 2021, we were able to expand the lease control over First Street North, so it went from a tiny 80 unit project to a 248 unit project, so that's quite a substantial increase. And yes, that's the project that just broke ground. We're really excited. It'll be open in 2 years, so come check it out. And then in the meantime, we're still working to get community control over the other 2 sites, so I guess that is another 10-year project. So I just want to very quickly name, after SLT got created, other people said, this is great, but it doesn't do everything. So one thing that happened is some of the Sansei folks that have been long involved in the community said, well, we should figure out the private property thing. So they created the Little Tokyo Community Impact Fund, which is raising money to then say, can we buy property? So they've now raised enough money that they're starting to put bids on different properties that are becoming available. Unfortunately, property owners want a lot more money than we have to offer. They're like, oh, so you can do 3 million, but they can do 5 million. And we're like, well, how much do we have to raise? So that's going slowly. Little Tokyo Towers, which is the 300-unit low-income senior housing on 3rd Street, they've been going through a rehab and through their finance model process that I should understand because I'm on this foundation board, but I don't understand it still, so don't ask me questions about that. But with it, they got $30 million, so that's great. And then, so they have been able to use it to help fund the First Street North apartments, and just think about a way to act as a community pool of like funds for everyone. And then of course, Little Tokyo Service Center. I've never worked for LTSC, I am not a secret plant, I'm just their biggest fan. I'm so grateful for LTSC. They started off as social services back in the 70s, coming out of the movement. And then in the 90s, as a lot of things started changing, someone said to them, you should do community development. And they're like, we don't know how. They just figured it out and learned, and now they own several properties in Little Tokyo, and are also able to build new housing and new projects. And I sometimes feel like we wouldn't have a lot of things we did if it weren't for them, so I just feel really grateful for that. I also just want to mention some next generation work. I have been seen as a young person in Little Tokyo for so long. And I still get called that, and I'm like, I am not young anymore. I now use Yelder. I'm a Yelder. I'm a young Yelder. But as a person who really benefited from a lot of mentorship and programs, I've always really held like youth mentorship and youth organizing work really like strong in my heart. So things that I just want to point out that we've been doing down in LA. One is Kizuna. So Kizuna is now 13 years old, and that is a youth leadership organization really dedicated to building a pipeline of youth and young folks into our community, working with everyone from like things like kindergarten up to post-college. And part of it is really intentionally plugging them into the organizations and spaces that already exist, because it isn't just about the organization, it's about the whole community. NCI, I think folks are familiar with the Nikki Community Internship. I'm an NCI alumni, and I like really love that program. I think it's an incredible way that we, again, plug people in. Budokan actually started this idea back in the 70s. Like, we love sports. We love basketball, we love martial arts, we love ping pong. And so the idea is like, well, if we have a rec center, then people will come here. It finally got built in 2020. It took, again, a really long time. But now that it's open, it is bringing people in, and we see that as like a project of the future. LT Roots is just me and my friends a decade ago throwing parties. But again, like the idea was like, oh, like we want young people to be here all the time. When you're young, what do you want to do? You want to hang out with your friends. So the idea was young people get together to do things to bring other young people in. And I think it's great when older people do this as well, but I think there is a resonance when it's a young person doing something for fellow youth. And then Next Generation Nikkei Fund has been around for a while, but again, it was the idea of we have benefited as a community a lot from the philanthropy of the Issei, the Nisei, the Sansei, just so many people. Next generations need to continue that as well, right? Like our organizations are not going to survive if we are not supporting them. That is just sad and a fact. That means that our resources are not going to stretch as far. I think young people, we all know that, right? Like, are we going to buy a house? I don't know. But at the same time, we have to figure out how we are supporting our organizations. So things like this was a way to say, people should think about how they raise money and then support these organizations. Things I just want to name that we're thinking about is, I think the same might be true up here, but in Little Tokyo, while we have like 60 legacy businesses, a lot of them do not have future plans. If they're a legacy business, that means the owner is probably also older. And if their kids don't want to take over, what's going to happen, right? So one thing that we've been trying to do is like, please tell us if you want to retire, and maybe we can find someone to buy you out. Like, that would be great. And then it can stay in community under a different family or a different person, but it would still be here as part of that legacy. So that's happened with Little Tokyo Florist. It started as Kudagami Florist, and then the owner, Mary, she met a manager at another business. She said, do you want to own a business? And Yuko was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then Yuko's like, okay, I'll learn this. So Mary trained her, introduced her to all the people, showed her how to make like the funeral sprays, all that. And now, so they had to change the name because of like a property thing, but now it is still a legacy business owned by a new person, and I feel like that's like a beautiful transition for that. I also just want to name demographic changes. Our community is changing. We all know that. But that also means Japantowns are changing, and I think as you think about what is your vision for your community, it's important to think about who's in that vision, who's included, and then how do you do that work. And this is my last slide. I think just things I wanted to, again, name like that I feel is unique about Little Tokyo, and I say that just as here's where we're coming from. We have been in this fight for a long time, as I mentioned, like since Nisei Week, people have been thinking about how do we keep Little Tokyo going on for the future? So that's almost 100 years of intentional work towards building towards our future. The 70s and 80s, as it was mentioned, things were just being torn down, and that really obviously scared people. So that prompted people to create the institutions that now are our foundation, and we're really lucky to have. Density of organizations. So many organizations, and while that is a lot on a funding perspective, it is really helpful from having just a lot of people who are there in a clear, committed way. We love to plan. Since the 80s, I think Little Tokyo goes through planning processes. So the only thing that's different now is we're like, okay, we need to create the execution plan. It's like one thing to build a strategic plan. It's another thing to build like an execution plan. So we've just gotten better at like implementing. But we do come from a long line and lineage of people planning all the time. And then we've also just been lucky and I think it's similar here, but having folks that have been doing this work for their whole life and building up generations of that work, and even things like the Asian American movement folks who said, we need to come back to our Japantowns and rebuild them and connect with our homes. In Little Tokyo, at least, a lot of those folks stayed. They stayed as part of organizations or in different ways. So when people around my age came in, we had them as our mentors to be trained and be passed things on, and that feels really lucky. This is just a cute slide of people, yay, this is our pandemic stuff. I'm gonna pause there because I could ramble forever, and I know we want to get to Q&A, but yes, pandemic photos, this is the end of the slideshow.
We're going to announce Q&A time. We have up to 15 minutes for this. And I also want to mention that we're going to have time to talk to each other too, so let's use this time to ask questions of Kristin, and we can share our perspectives and information with each other in a little bit.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm interested in your community campaign that you had done for Little Tokyo. How did you go about getting that funded? Like, what's behind it? Is the city working with you to fund that?
Yes, so for Sustainable Little Tokyo itself, again, just all the love and props to LTSC, they as a bigger organization have access to larger grants. So they were able to apply for a lot of grants and funding that helped create Sustainable Tokyo, that they actually sent the money to LTCC to hire me. So LTCC as an all-volunteer organization couldn't do that. So they were given money by a bigger org to say, okay, hire a person. For the campaign itself, by this point, we had transitioned Sustainable Tokyo over to the Japanese American Culture and Community Center to be the host, and that's when I became this position. And that's when we also pivoted the project to be arts-based. So we said we were going to use arts-based strategies as our way of organizing and doing creative planning work, et cetera. So that also opened up more funding. So in addition to kind of the previous types of neighborhood support work, we're also then able to apply for arts and cultural funding, which has, in California at least, like some decent pockets of money. So we were able to put together money from like Kresge, Cerna, all these bigger foundations, and that's what helped. And I think when we first started this project, people didn't understand, like, they didn't understand how to fund organizing work or neighborhood work or like small business support work. It just wasn't in their framework. But by the time we got here, because so many neighborhoods were going through gentrification, I think all the foundations were like, oh, we should start supporting that type of work. So we are lucky as an already built up organization and structure and neighborhood to be able to apply for those and be one of the first orgs to receive things like that. So that's where that fund came from.
Thank you.
Hi, is LTCC membership-based, or are you a board-based organization?
We are all of the above. So we are membership-based. We have, I think, like 90 members that are in good standing. We work with more than that. It's just, you know, hard to chase after people to pay their membership. But the way our bylaws work, the board is still the governing authority. But what we try to do from a process and community conversation level is all things will start in committees and outreach and one-to-one, things like that. Then we'll approve it at the committee level, we'll take it to our board, then we'll take it to membership to be the ratifying vote, and then if the members have anything they deeply want to change about that position, they'll propose it as an amendment, and then that goes back to the board to finally approve. It's process forever, but yeah.
I read in the Rafu Shinpo, you know, there could be a fourth Japantown, Sawtell.
Yeah.
Is that a concern for fund, or are you guys supporting them? I was just, you know, wondering.
Yeah.
I've been there and it's lots of little shops, but I don't, you know.
So, I mean, LA, I think, as all our communities are, is so deeply intertwined. You're like, oh, we're related? That's great. So I think there is a long-standing just relationship between individuals, between Sawtell and Little Tokyo. As far as Japantown work, I think that they're still figuring out their work as far as what it means to like fight for its future as a Japantown, and their work is just so different because of their context. But so we're not like mad at each other, we're not like competing for things. I think if we all had more time, we'd love to work with each other more and find ways to support. This sounds bad, but I'm like, the West Side is so far, like I will never go out there. And they probably feel the same. They're like, we're not gonna go all the way to downtown. So it's not like the close relationship that it probably should be, but we're friends, we're like loose friends, yeah.
Where were the, I'm sure you had obstacles, where were the major obstacles and how did you overcome them to all this process?
There's so many obstacles. I guess like biggest ones, one is always like time and capacity. We're all busy, and I think that's the thing I think about now is even like all the players in Little Tokyo, they cannot just like sacrifice the whole day for the bigger picture anymore. It used to be like people are like, yeah, like, we'll just do all day retreats all day, that's fine. People are so busy now and under-resourced, so it's harder to, so that's why if we're lucky that we can pay organizers to go and do one-to-one and then trick people into coming back together. But just like yes, I can sacrifice all this time and come out. So I think time and capacity, resources and funding is always going to be a big thing. I think in LA and Little Tokyo, we're pretty lucky, honestly. Like, we have built up a lot of generations of support, but also everyone is always panicked about the future. It's really scary to think about like what are, like the Adatani Foundation, which has been funding everyone for decades, they just sunsetted last year. And that's huge, right? Like, that's like everyone's like main funder. So it's like, oh, what are we gonna do?
Wow.
And then I just think that where we're located, it's ironic that we were forced to be there, and now it's the most coveted place in all of LA where developers want to be. So we are playing in a field now with like big money, and it's not the same fight that it was even 20 years ago because of people internationally are looking to develop in Little Tokyo because the payoff for them could be that big. And that's, I think, with Quizar, our council member who's now in jail, is like, he never got us the property. That would be so easy because he was totally entertaining offers from billionaires and trying to get paid out for it. So I think that is hard, and we're, at the end of the day, we're like a ragtag bunch of community people trying to do our best, so it's hard to compete with billions of dollars. And I think we have, like, some of these projects are what we call like catalytic projects, where they just will on their own create so much more speculation and investment and interest in the neighborhood. It feels a little daunting about like when you look at the whole picture and you step back, you're like, oh my gosh, what do we do? So I think our approach is to say, like, can we take things piece by piece and step by step, and like where can we be effective and where do we just figure out like mitigations? So I don't know if that's sorry, when you ask like what are the challenges, I'm like, there's millions of challenges. But I guess those are the biggest ones that immediately come to mind. Yeah.
My question might be a little bit bigger picture and outside of the box, because Susan told me to think outside the box when I was coming here. But my question is, like, a lot of the presentation was focused on like consumerism within Little Tokyo and marketing, and really, for me, it seemed like creating Little Tokyo into a tourist destination, which I think, and I've only learned about, the redevelopments through like ethnic studies and through talking with some of the elders, and like that was one of their big fights against redevelopment in the 60s in San Francisco Japantown, and it turning into more of a tourist attraction spot, and really pushing out the local residents there, pushing out the local businesses there. And so my question is, like, how can we think beyond consumerism and being more than just the products that we're selling, and finding ways to allow people to live in Little Tokyo, thrive in Little Tokyo without having to spend money. I think it's important to like support local businesses and things like that, but if money becomes the only thing that we're focusing on that will sustain Little Tokyo, I'm worried that we'll fall back into this like consumerist trap of like becoming a marketing spree for like getting other people in and things like that. So that I'm just trying to figure out like how we can balance both and not fall into the traps that like we got trapped into before.
Yeah, I feel like it's like yes and no, right? Like, I think on the one hand, yes, like, are we trying to become, please don't be offended, I always say, like, I don't want to be Oriental Disneyland.
Yeah.
We are not trying to become like tourist trap fake version of like culture and authenticity. On the other hand, when you think about like what is the ecosystem of your neighborhood and what it needs to survive, money is a fundamental part of that. I'm sorry, I know that feels like crass, but like, if you're not spending money, your business is closed. If your businesses are gone, what do you have left? And then yes, we have our institutions, we have our churches and temples. I personally consider small businesses a core foundation part of Little Tokyo. You're wearing a Japantown's hat. Thank you for supporting a small business. That is part of our neighborhood and our community. If we are not bringing people there, we're going to lose it. And that's just a fact, right? Like, people are gonna spend money in the world. If they're not spending on our small businesses, we won't have them. And that is really scary for me as a person who cares about these Japantown. I think what they were fighting in the 70s and 80s and what we still fight today is like corporate structures coming in and taking over things that don't care about the neighborhood, don't care about people, they don't care about the community. That is what is scary. So that's why I say, like, do we want 3 Starbucks? No. Do we love Cafe Dulce, a small mom and pop business? Absolutely. That is important. So I think about like people. People is what is important in community. A corporation is not people, right? That's just like this thing coming in. And then I think this goes back to like, what is under threat? Our institutions need help, but they at least usually own their own land, or they have some sort of funding mechanism to help them survive, so we are supporting them. We have our housing, the market rate housing, it's there, they're fine, I'm not worried about them. Our low-income housing is already protected, so residents, we're pretty good. So that leaves businesses and like culture and community. So yes, people should be able to come and hang out, and they do. A lot of people come to Little Tokyo and don't spend money, that's great. But if people come and don't spend any money, then again, we're losing our small businesses. So think about when you go to Little Tokyo, what would it look like if Japanese Village Plaza was just all corporate chains? Would you be like, oh, we've lost Little Tokyo, we've lost this neighborhood. So that's what we're focused on, is how to support the people who can't, like small businesses don't have the, they don't have like a marketing team, some of them don't even know how to like run a website and Instagram, so we are the ones to do that for them. So I understand what you're saying, I hear where you're coming from, but I think it's a little naive. Like, I'm sorry, like I think you're not thinking through the full ecosystem of how these neighborhoods function.
And we have 2 more questions, time for 2 more questions.
Hi, do you have some sort of zoning restriction against large Japanese chains from coming in? I was walking around and I didn't see like Ramen Nagi or Beard Papa.
Oh, there is a Beard Papa.
There is a Beard Papa. Okay. But is there some way that you have zoning so that you could favor locally owned and not the huge Japanese chains that are like hitting Honolulu?
So California is hard. California is very free market forever. So like, for example, it is against the law to enact rent control for small businesses. We have to work on a legislation to get rid of that, to even make things like that happen. We've always looked at like Pikes Pier as like an interesting model of like, they have an ordinance of like, it has to be like no chains, only small businesses. The only chains that there is Starbucks, that's their first location, that's why. So we've looked into things like that. It's like a policy nightmare to figure out how to get there. So we don't have ordinances like that. We've looked into it. It's just a bigger fight, and there's a lot of smaller fires that are in front of us. I think the reason we didn't have a lot of it for a long time is frankly they weren't interested. They were going to Torrance, they were going to Gardena, they were going to Orange County. We were not where they wanted to be. They didn't see us as like the place where the money is. Now that Little Tokyo is back on the rise again with all the like developments coming in, that's where we are starting to see some of that come in. But we're actually now so expensive that it's really hard for them to even enter, because they're like, oh, is this worth it? We'll go back down to Torrance. So it's more that.
Okay, we have time for 1 more question.
Yeah, so just going back to the previous question, I think that's going back to the previous comment that you were talking about really the formula for success, right? And then many different variables, funding and money is core. We all know that, especially in very expensive areas like Little Tokyo, San Jose as well. Have you figured out the actual success factors to kind of to turn that corner and try to stay ahead of that? I know it's extremely challenging, but I'm just wondering, have you sights of what that looks like?
I mean, I think in my ideal, we would own all of our own land, and then it'd be in community control, and then we'd be able to make those decisions for ourselves. So that's why, like, whenever like the Powerball hits like a really high number, we all buy lotto tickets, things like that. And then again, that's why like I always hype LTSC, because anytime, like especially like an old historic building goes up for sale, they try to buy it. And then they can be the ones to determine who are the tenants, or keep the tenants in there, or keep the low-income housing. We've started to see there's like a single resident occupancy covenant in Los Angeles that says like, if you are this particular type of low-income affordable housing, it's safe. And some of the last remaining types of housing like that are in Little Tokyo. Developers are now finding loopholes for it, right? They're finding ways to get out of it. So I don't even say there's like a one, I don't know if we're actually successful. Like, I think, just to be honest, like, I appreciate when people are like, oh, Little Tokyo's doing a good job. I'm like, are we? I don't know if we are. Like, things are always eroding all the time, and it feels really scary. I think we're doing the best we can, and I think if we had all the money in the world and all the power in the world, like, then, like, I can envision, like, our dream of what we would be and what we would do. I feel really grateful that because of all the things being torn down in the 70s and the 80s, it kickstarted people into saying, we need to start building up things now. So during the redevelopment era, we lost a lot, but Little Tokyo looks like it does today because of what they were able to do during that time after all the things were torn down. So, like, they moved churches and temples to Little Tokyo from other parts of Southern California to anchor it. Mm-hmm. So, like, they moved Centenary from Crenshaw, they moved Higashi from Boyle Heights. Like, they brought these to the neighborhood to say, okay, people will still go to church, so we'll put them in Little Tokyo. Japanese Village Plaza, which is, do I have a picture of it? It's, like, now seen as, like, the iconic part of, it's like this blue building. That was built specifically to be a place for small businesses, and I think rents were subsidized for the first 5 years. And people love it for, like, the look of it, but, like, for me, it's like that's one of the corridors of, like, our oldest businesses because it was built for small businesses. So some of the original tenants are still in there, and, like, they're celebrating 50 years because they're original tenants, and that's what helps make that up for us. But it really comes down to, like, do you have a say in things, right? Like, and I think that's where, like, being organized is really helpful. Having a seat at the table. If you're able to control what happens there, you can, make sure your people are there. But if you don't own it, if you're not in control, you don't have that lever or mechanism, I think that's when we start to, like, lose things.
Okay. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, Kristin, for your talk. And to move into our group discussions now. So I'm going to call our facilitators' names, and they're going to raise their hand and go to where they are going to meet you. So Kathy, can you raise your hand, please? If you have a blue sticker on your name tag, you're going to go with Kathy over there. Wait, don't move yet. Green is Robin. Where's Robin? Robin is green. If you have a green sticker, you can go with Robin over to the registration table. Yellow is Susan. If you have a yellow sticker, you're going to go with Susan over here. Right, Susan? Right here. You're going to stay here. And then a red sticker is going to go with Tom. He's in the back there. You're going to move to the back. We are going to have 15 minutes for these small group discussions, and our facilitators are going to talk you through these questions that are on the back of our flyer here. So enjoy your conversation.
Black and white. Black and white.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to do, by way of summary, every facilitator from the group is going to give an under 1 minute kind of set of highlights from the conversation. So we're going to start with Susan.
Nikki? Alan. Alan said he'll do the show. Oh, Alan was going to give our summary. You want to give our 1 minute? 1 minute.
Under 1 minute. You can talk here.
Hi everyone, my name is Alan Ng. I volunteer at the San Jose JCL. My wife is now for G. So as involved with this interesting discussion with Susan about the challenges we face. And so I just want to summarize what the group discussed. And I think I would summarize it by saying the first big challenge we face is getting organized. And organized around a common vision, mission to figure out what will be the future success of San Jose Japantown. And so when you think about the work that the LTCC has done, which I think is phenomenal, is that they organized because of a compelling event. And that compelling event was the jail. We need to create our own compelling event so it's not externally imposed on us, such that we can organize and then chart our future with our own motives and goals in mind, and not have to respond, so we can be more proactive. So just to summarize, I would say the first step is to really organize it as a community with the leaders to come together and understand that we need to do this together, and the cooperation is going to be critical.
Thank you. Thank you.
Trung.
Hi, so hi everyone, I'm Tron. Representing the illustrious Tom, who was a fantastic facilitator for us. So we talked about a lot of different things, and to just quickly summarize, it underscored a lot of what Alan was talking about, where there's a lot of promise and opportunity in our community. We were hoping for this conversation to kind of be the beginning steps of what do we want to do from here, right? And a lot of what we took away from the presentation was there are structures to organize, there are structures to envision, and this is where perhaps we need to come together and start thinking about that, right? As we start to think about our longer term vision of what do we want this community to be in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, right? How do we make it accessible to all folks, right? In the meantime, there are short-term questions of we are losing businesses, right? We have empty storefronts, right? We don't want those to become chains or X, Y, and Z. How do we start to build strategic alliances and leverage certain resources, knowing that those will be our short-term limited visions, and work with people who can be aligned with our community vision, and then from there go towards how do we retain this space as community controlled and a bigger community resistance kind of conversation, right? So that's kind of what we talk about. Oh, and talk about utilizing the university a little bit more. So we have a couple people here from that, so let's definitely utilize those relationships and partnerships.
So, hello everybody, I'm Robin from San Jose Resistors. I really just tried to capture everything that everybody had to say, which was a lot. We kind of began with, what are our lessons from this presentation, and we said all of them. We want to implement a lot of these great ideas and work with the different Japantowns to kind of come up with best practices and strategies to address our problems that are very unique to San Jose Japantown. We talked a lot about partnering with San Jose State. Can we make it a requirement for Asian American Studies students to come to Japantown and be a part of Japantown? Yeah. And then we also highlighted a lot of the great things that we are doing. San Jose Taiko has a space in Japantown, raising a lot of money. It's all over the place, but yeah, we really want to work in partnership and communicate across organizations.
Okay, I think everyone's pretty much covered many of the topics we talked about too. But I think some of the things that popped out at us was the tools, the wonderful tools that Kristin had mentioned, like developing a pipeline within our community and figuring out how to get that going so that we aren't losing some of our legacy businesses like San Jose Tofu. And basically, it's an election year. This is a time to really maybe get some people in power that will represent, the community needs and everything like that. We were sad that not more small businesses could be represented today, but the thing is, they're working. Everyone has to be out there. So how do we be sensitive to holding these kind of conversations and yet be able to involve, participation by everyone? But I think that's about it. I think everything else was pretty much covered.
We have one more thing that we wanted to add. Vicki. Go ahead, Vicki.
Okay, I'm with Robin, and one of the things that was missing from our information we wanted to share with you is that San Jose Japantown has so much talent in its community. They just forgot how strong they are. And when they come together as a unit, when they're all brought to the table, they can move mountains. And there are examples of this, and UI Kai is one of them. And it's celebrating its 50th year this year. And secondly, the information that we lack in terms of being able to move the mountain again is we need planning information, because that jargon can be daunting. And so we're jealous that you have a whole nonprofit that has all this knowledge, and we want that knowledge. We want planning so we can build in Japantown and own. So thank you.
Okay, let's keep clapping for Kristin for coming all the way. For being our conduit. beautiful day. It's supposed to be 71 degrees today, so enjoy your day. We have one more announcement, which is from Trung.
Yes, so we really would love feedback about the event and if you want to stay in touch, et cetera, et cetera. So we have feedback forms here. They're anonymous, so please feel free to be as honest as possible. We're going to debrief this amongst the organizing team and see what we can take from it. There's two versions. There's the online version of the QR code. Please let us know what you think. And also a paper version if you prefer. We'll have it at the front up here, so if you could do that and turn it into me afterwards, that would be great. And thank you all so much.
I want to say this is a continuation of a conversation that's been going on for a long time. And we hope that it expands and goes deeper into the future. And so on the back of your flyer with all the questions that we have an invitation for you to join us at our next San Jose Nikkei Resistors meeting, which is the March 12th at 7 p.m. At Wesley. And we like to bring, we will bring some snacks. So please join us. Thank you all very much.
We came right in time for the